Cool. Hi, everyone. My name's Edward Thomas. This is the first time I've presented with Zoom, so it's my pleasure to introduce myself. I've been studying astrology since 2010 and just a variety of different practices, different schools of thought. I found myself drawn to Jeff Green's EA, spent some time with Vedic astrology, Hellenistic with Chris Brennan, as well as some other modalities, different systems of thought, human design. And most recently, I've been really interested in somatic meditation. And one of the intentions that I have about this presentation, and at this point in my life, is really integrating my love of astrology and this sort of intellectual draw that I have to understanding charts with a deeper connection to the body and a deeper connection to the lived experience that we have as human beings. Now, I thought that it would be a nice start to look at my chart, not because I'm entirely vain, but because I discovered astrology 8 years ago, the fall of 2010, the last time that Venus was retrograde in Scorpio. So in my chart, my ruling planet is Venus. It's conjunct my moon in the first house in Scorpio. So 8 years later, reflecting on the things that I've picked up and the things that I've gathered from that fall in 2010. And when I discovered astrology, it was among sort of a series of spiritual experiences, a series of asking questions that I hadn't really asked at other points in my life. And, being drawn to astrology, being drawn to psychic phenomena, different aspects of how we would live our lives. What kind of work do I want to do? How do I want to supplement my body? So it was interesting, but it was very inwardly focused. And I think the last 8 years, there's been a lot of focus and pressure on studying and exploring these topics, but not necessarily sharing it. And, an intention that I have is learning to integrate these and share what I've learned, share what's been of value for me. And this feels like a step in the right direction. So I want to start with a couple of quotes and look at what the idea of embodiment means. So this is Chogyam Trungpa, who, we could give a lot of credit to for bringing Tibetan Buddhism, Vajrayana Buddhism to the West. And he said in a lecture in 1981, he said, "Fundamentally speaking, ladies and gentlemen, here is the really good news, if we may call it that. We are intrinsically Buddha, and we are intrinsically good. Without exception, and without the need for analytical studies, we can say that we automatically have Buddha within us. That is known as Buddha nature, or bodhichitta, the heart of the Buddha." Which is, just that in itself, being told that there isn't a problem. It's a lot for our human minds to really wrap themselves around when we try to objectify all these issues that we have with our lives. But I'll look into the meaning of bodhicitta in a moment. But first, I'd like to share another quote before I do that, which is from Reggie Ray. And Dr. Reginald Ray he was a student of Chogyam Trungpa. He was a professor of comparative religion at Natal University in Colorado, and then the founder of the Dharma Ocean Foundation. And a really inspiring character in my life. I think he puts his teachings in a really clear-cut way, translating the teachings of Vajrayana Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, into a language and a character that really resonates to the Western mind. And he says, this is from Touching Enlightenment, which is a book of his, "To be awake, to be enlightened, is to be fully and completely embodied. To be fully embodied means to be at one with who we are in every respect, including our physical being, our emotions, and the totality of our karmic situation. It is to be entirely present to who we are and to the journey of our own becoming. It is to inhabit completely our relative reality with no speck of ourselves left over, no external observer waiting for something else or something better." And in my words, it's not leaving anything behind. Every aspect of our life, every neurosis or seemingly karmic pattern or relationship or issue with relationship or anything that's ever trickled across our mind, trickled across our experience is a vital part of our journey as a human being. And to set anything aside is to have an incomplete system. To set anything aside is not to look at the whole, but is to look at something that is less than the whole. This is Creston, Colorado. Felt like it was a good starting place for our journey. It's the home of a few different practicing lineages. And just for a moment, I want to talk about embodiment. What does embodiment mean? Spiritual embodiment. I think it's kind of a buzzword nowadays, relating it to yoga or, other sorts of spiritual intentions that want to lead us back to the body. And I want to go back to the definition that I put forward because it connects to a couple other definitions that I found online. So the idea of embodiment, written by Madeline Schaefer, who funnily enough, I stumbled across this online, but she was a student at the school I worked at in San Francisco, so it's a funny coincidence. Sorry. So we don't experience the body with our minds. We experience it on a much more subtle, non-verbal level. And, we can think about our lives. We can ask questions, and we can engage on a primarily mental level. But in my experience, the feeling nature isn't necessarily just gooey or isn't necessarily just, how do I feel? But it actually encompasses all these other facets of our life. The way that we think about things, there's a certain limit to that. But when we include thinking within our feeling capacity, our whole life, our whole experience as a human being on Earth is encompassed within this subtle, non-verbal level. So when I talk about embodiment, this is the direction that I want to go. Not necessarily contained in astrology alone, or not necessarily contained even in the body alone, although it's probably our most important tool, but contained within a language that encompasses all of this. In a language of, you could say colors and vibrations, yet not just on the surface, but on a visceral, felt level. Everything inspiring everything else, and everything inspiring our personal experience. How does this make us feel? And it makes us feel something. And I also want to look at silence, the great and powerful mystery. The canvas where all of this takes place. And however it happens to be filled, whatever colors, whatever emotional disposition, whatever characterization, individuation, as we can see in individual's birth chart, it takes place on the canvas of all that is. And I'm not going to go straight into astrology right now, but just taking a moment and appreciating the beauty that the form of the birth chart takes. Not necessarily with any planets in any particular houses, but just the empty space of the chart. How much potential there is. The archetypal characterization of whomever has ever walked this planet. It's breathing. And the potential is limitless. It's so beautiful. And I think it's worth seeing our experiences as people in this world, taking that same form of, a limitless canvas. And again, I'll go back to the astrology later, but I think it's clear from any astrologer's experience and point of view that there is a sense of divine reflection going on in our lives. And whether that's the astrology chart, reflecting our experience as a human being, or our experience as a human being reflecting the astrology chart, or even, you know, the sensations and tensions that we feel in our body reflecting our mind, or vice versa, or any sort of reflection. Because I think this is a funny metaphor, but it really seems like we're living in a house of mirrors, and you can't tell where, you know, the fundamental essence is really coming from. Yet, regardless of what's happening, what's occurring, it's taking place within this vast realm of empty silence, like the silence between notes in a song, the great and powerful mystery. Professor Ferrer, who also coincidentally worked at the school that I worked at in San Francisco, wrote that embodied spirituality views all human dimensions, body, vital, mind, and consciousness, as equal partners in bringing self, community, and world into a fuller allotment with a mystery out of which everything arises. Never setting anything aside. Now, bodhichitta, which Chogyam Trungpa mentioned in his in the snippet of the lecture that I used, where he said that we are intrinsically Buddha, we are intrinsically good, and we are intrinsically bodhichitta. Now, taking that apart, it's combining two Sanskrit terms, bodhi, which translates roughly to intellect, and chitta, which translates to heart or essence, roughly. And when I think of intellect, I think of the penetrating mind, you know, the mind that is always present, experiencing the world and digging deeper into the mystery. Now, Buddhi, although it's always present, you know, at certain points we, you know, willfully keep ourselves away from whatever emotion we might be feeling. We might be feeling cloudy, and our life might feel a little more foggy. Buddhi is still there, but it's underneath the fog. Yet when we're in line with our personal practices, when we're eating well, developing healthy and positive relationships, with a meditation practice, you know, intellect can become very clear, it can become very crystalline, and I used this word before, but penetrating. Interestingly, in Vedic astrology, the planet Mercury is titled Buddhi. And this was one of the things that inspired me to, you know, really start trying to integrate my interest in yoga and my interest in somatic meditation with my love of astrology. And I'll get to that more later. Chitta translates roughly to heart or essence. My practice is called essence astrology because I think it's a really beautiful practice to recognize the essence that each of us carries as an individual. You know, and regardless of what our life looks like, there's an archetypal essentiality to who we are as people. You know, so we see the Buddhi and we see the Chitta. So we see the intelligence of the heart, the intelligence of the essential nature of a human being. And regardless of where a person falls in their life, you know, there's a power to what they're experiencing as it's being driven by the intellect, by the Buddhi. And this brings me to the idea of relative bodhicitta and ultimate bodhicitta. And I think we all have a cosmic vision of what ultimate bodhicitta is. In my own experience, it's, you know, whether through plant medicines or through meditation or, you know, some sort of circumstance in my life, it's this awareness of a pure white light, this awareness of all that is, all the colors vibrating at the same time. And, it might seem on the surface very spiritual or very divine, but I think there's a sense of detachment, when we focus all of our energy into experiencing ultimate bodhicitta. And what is perhaps more difficult is tuning in and respectfully maintaining an awareness of relative bodhicitta. And relative bodhicitta is seeing where my life is, all of the things that have interrelated to lead me to the place that I'm at now. And I could say my relationships, or what I had for lunch today, or, the mistakes that I might have made a couple of years ago that are still bogging me down. And this is all part of relative bodhicitta. And I tuned into the presentation that was before me a little bit, just to get a feeling for some of the other topics that people were talking about. And I remember the presenter was talking about how when we have a connection to all that is, and these aren't her words exactly, but when we have a connection to all that is, it creates a stronger sense of the I am. And I think we could relate that to the idea of ultimate bodhicitta and relative bodhicitta, where, although having an awareness of all that is powerful and inspiring, I think that it really just leads us into a greater awareness of ourself. And, we have a greater sense of power and responsibility when we can see this potential of what is. Does anybody have any questions so far? You can unmute yourself if you do.
I just want to say that this is really poetic. It's nice because the feeling of poetry that's being delivered with, I feel like, is helping me to really osmose with what you're saying. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So we carry on. So what's interesting about bodhicitta and the intellect is I see so many connections between that idea, this divine motor that's driving us forward in our lives, with ideas from different philosophies. My mom just texted me. Different philosophies and spiritual systems. One of which I think is so profound is the writing of Dane Rudhyar. And he brought in the idea of the seed. And he kept referring to the seed. I think I could, list more than 10 articles that are just, referencing the brilliance of the seed, because it is a very beautiful metaphor. And he says, all that your birth chart reveals to you is a play of forces. The main themes of your existence are there latent, as the oak is latent in the acorn. And then the seed of the natal chart, we see the absolute potential of that human being, the archetypal characterization of what that person could become if they lived to their absolute divinity, if they lived to their absolute calling and trusted nothing else. Yet in the life of the acorn, as it grows into the oak, it's weathered by storm, struck by lightning, rubbed against by the antler of a deer, pissed on. And although the potential is still there, part of the experience of the seed is to, I suppose, have that calling, and to work towards that calling, but to experience the obstacles that come in the natural journey into the oak. The seed in every species is the condition nearest to that of a sphere, which the life forces manifesting through that species may ever reach. As the sphere is the perfect cosmic form toward which all particular life forms are evolving, one may infer that the seed is the point of perfection of all life. I love that. And I love the picture of every one of our essences, what is contained in the natal chart, what sings through us when we really allow ourselves to create, contained in a simple sphere. And no sphere is greater or less than another, yet it contains whatever color is in that person's palette. Through what lens does the person experience the world, and how do they create? I found these articles by Rudyard. There's an archive called Chaldea, I think chaldea.org. It's really worth exploring, and I think that there's a lot of deep-rooted exploration of astrology that has influenced a lot of the evolutionary astrologers that I've learned from, along with myself. So I encourage you. I can post the link after my presentation. So my next slide is the intelligence of the soul. I have a nice image of an Android Jones painting, which is pretty cool. And going back to the seed, going back to Bodhi or Mercury or intellect, we see an interesting paradox there, where the seed represents, both the beginning and end of the journey of the tree, or in, each of our cases, the human being, both the seed and its potential. And this is something that I'm trying to wrap my mind around too. So I encourage you to think about it, because it's truly a paradox if I've ever encountered one, and I've encountered a few, where, let's just call it Bodhi or Mercury, designs this outline for an experience that we have as human beings, and then sets it forth, with all these transits, these progressions, these interrelations, with others through synastry and composite charts. And each instance, again, each transit, each progression, each interrelation, has the opportunity to allow us to delve deeper into ourselves. And when we remember that at one point we were the seed and there was nothing but potential, and although we're growing seemingly away from the seed form, no matter how quickly or slowly we move, we're moving towards that potential. And I think that there's a grander conversation to, what is the soul? What is intellect? What is chitta? And, by engaging in the writings of Jeff Green and his influences, we can start to form a picture, and we can start, having conversations and sort of coming to our own conclusions. I forgot what I was going to say regarding that, but ultimately, the world works in mysterious ways. It's like sort of moving forward, the importance of a system. Now in quotes, I have: the purpose of a system is what it does. And the definition is a set of connected things or parts forming a complex whole. A set of principles or procedures according to which something is done, an organized scheme or method. So we see two different variations of what a system is. We could look at it as a human body, or in this case, because the human body is so utterly complex, I don't know where I would begin to speak about it, with organ systems and nervous systems and reproductive, and it's all interrelated at the same time. I figured I would stick with the eye. And I can't necessarily describe the workings of the human eye. I'd tell you magic, but I think someone could give a more apt approach to their understanding. But we see different layers of it. We see where the optic nerve connects to the brain, and we see the fluid that's contained in it that allows it to move in a particular way. And we see the lens, the cornea, and so on. So when I think of parts creating a complex whole, I think of the eye. And if one of these things were to be lacking, there would be a significant handicap in the function of the complex whole. All right. Now, another type of system is a set of principles or procedures according to which something is done, an organized scheme or method. If you have a job and you do things in a particular kind of way, maybe use a system for getting things done, a system for ordering product, if you're a vendor of some sort, or, a system of how you decide to throw out spoiled food if you work at a grocery store, who knows? But another example would be the Planetary Method of chart interpretation. So this is Jeff Green's School of Evolutionary Astrology. And I've only encountered this in, he has a set of DVDs from a series of lectures that he gave in the 90s. I don't think I've encountered this in any text, but I'm not as well read as I'd like to be. But he talks about how, to interpret the natal chart, we can, work with a planetary method, starting from Pluto, evolutionary intent. And obviously there we're integrating on the polarity points as well. But just to go on, we start from the farthest end of the solar system. Then we move to the sun, which is how is this integrated? What is the vital theme? Moon, how is this personalized? How is it given character or identity? Mercury, what's its method of organizing information or taking in data information? Venus, value system. Mars, personal desire. Jupiter, function of the system as a whole. Saturn, structural integrity, and so on, right? So we have a system for how we go about interpreting the chart. And when we have a system, we're able to sort of stay within a certain bounds. We're able to keep ourselves organized in order to have a greater awareness of the data that's actually coming in. If we know that Pluto, which is going to be reflective of the soul and the soul's evolutionary intent, means this within the natal chart, then we can see that when it's in, I'll use myself as an example, when it's in Scorpio in the second house, there's going to be a particular way of doing things. There's going to be an almost compulsive obsession to figuring out the self, figuring out how can I find security? When is it going to come? What resources can I use to build myself up? And, we could talk about what else Pluto means. We could talk about, whether Mars is reflective of the car you're driving or the type of relationship that you're going to find, or your relationship to men or sex, and it means a lot of things. And I think for me, like in my astrological perspective, I realized the natal chart is going to, have something to say regarding every single aspect of our lives. But frankly, I don't have the energy to take all that apart. And it helps me to have a system, a baseline, where I can say, this is what it means within this given context. Now tell me about your life. Because if there's anything that I've learned, astrology is two parts. There's the astrological interpretation, the knowledge of how a birth chart is to be read, and there's the person sitting in front of you. And I don't want to be one to take away the power and knowledge that comes from just living a human life. I want to give credence and respect to that. So again, having a system to rely on, where I'm not getting caught up in what could happen or what this could represent too much, but recognizing that everything that's within the chart is already present, sitting in front of me, and it's lived 20, 30, 40, 50 years of its life. So that was Jeff Green's method of chart interpretation, planetary method of chart interpretation. Now, I had mentioned earlier that in Vedic astrology, Mercury is known as Buddhi. And I have a longing to dive deeper into that and to see it not just as representative of, another name to call Mercury and all of the things that Mercury signifies, but of a deeper intelligence and a deeper system, not just a system of interpretation, but a system like the human eye, where all of the parts work together. So in the 4 functions of the mind, we have Buddhi, we have Chitta, which I've spoken about, those 2. And Buddhi, again, is going to be the penetrating intelligence, perceiving the situation. Chitta is going to be the remembrance of the experiences and samskaras. So psychological disposition, the memories, the storehouse of everything that has ever happened to a person, the relationship to their family, that comes out in the way that they behave and the way that they become a part of the world in the day-to-day. There's going to be manas, and manas is going to be the value system. It's going to be how we label instinctively, yes, no, do we like this, do we not like this, and continually add to the storehouse of chitta. And then there's ahamkara. And my favorite way that I've heard ahamkara described, which was by Dr. Robert Svoboda in a famous book on Ayurveda. And he described ahamkara as that which every cell in a person's body serves. So every cell in my body is in service to the ahamkara, the great queen. So in a simple sense, every cell in my body is in service to Edward Thomas, the essence of who I am. When I'm feeling ill, when I'm taking care of myself, but I'm still feeling ill, the body's natural response is to figure out what's wrong and find equilibrium. So the ahamkara is the divine queen, which every cell in the body or in the system serves. And I think this will make it a little easier to understand and to put the different components together. But I just want to mention that, again, when I discovered that the name for Mercury in Vedic astrology was Buddhi, and began exploring what that means, the connotations of that. I wanted to connect the other functions of the mind to planetary bodies. And this is what I came up with. And I've heard conversations with other astrologers where they've got insight into this too, but again, this is what I came up with. Where Buddhi, the penetrating intellect, is Mercury. Manas, values, yes or no, how does this make me feel? And then attracting that same essence into a person's life. How does this make me feel? The sensual experience, Taurus, or you could say the judging. So we have the sensuality, Taurus, and then the judging nature of it, Libra. And then Chitta, and I think Jeff Green describes the moon in a really eloquent way. where it is the personalization, that is the storehouse of memories and experiences. So if someone has a moon in Aries, there's going to be a different set of samskaras or different types of conditioning compared to a person who has the moon in Scorpio like me. It's interesting just to think about the moon or chitta just alone. I like to view it as a sort of lens. So if we have the essence of the sun, the essence of what it means to be a human being, and you put it through a Scorpio lens, it's going to come through in a much different way than if you put it through a Capricorn lens, and vice versa. And then we have Ahamkara, which I connect to the earth. And as I've been exploring somatic meditation, and continuing my love of astrology, I've been put off by the fact that the earth isn't acknowledged within the interpretation of the natal chart. I'll go back to that in a second. So in Dharma Ocean, which is the school of contemporary Western Buddhism that I guess I practice under, there are a number of somatic protocols. So these are basic meditations that you can engage your body in to ultimately relax and develop a deeper awareness. So the first is called 10 points, where I essentially lie on the ground and point by point, which include the 2 feet, the 2 buttocks, the upper back, the shoulders, the elbows, and the head. I believe that's it. It's just sinking into an intentional awareness. And what I find in my experience is that, as I find greater and greater relaxation, my perception of what's actually going on in my body becomes heightened to a really insane degree. Not necessarily in a pleasant degree, although, some things feel really good. But if I have tension in my back, say my upper back or something, like by my left shoulder, and I make a conscious intention, or even more actively, I just feel what's going in there and investigate it, I suddenly realize that referring back to that great silence, that great space that we were talking about earlier, there's a lot more going on. And it starts to remind me of an ocean, where there's a school of fish swimming here, and there's a coral reef here, and there's so much activity going on. And what I thought was just a buzzkill before, this pain that's just been following me in my back, when I become sensitive to what's actually going on, it opens up and tells a whole story, and it contains layers and layers of sensation. So the second protocol is called earth breathing. So we have 10 points practice and then earth breathing. And in earth breathing, you take the same form, lying down. Ideally you would be relaxed, already present in your body. And I start to bring my awareness down into the ground below me, breathing into it, sinking into it. And first 5 feet, then 10 feet, and 20 feet into the ground, then a mile, and 2 miles. And as I do this, I'm not actually sinking into the earth necessarily, but my awareness starts to expand, and the space, that I imagine my body to be starts growing bigger and bigger and bigger and stretching, to the point where, it sounds far-fetched, but there's no difference between my awareness of my body and my awareness of the earth. Now, I'm going to come back to this in a little bit because I think there's some symbolism within the natal chart that this idea can help us approach. Does my description of the somatic protocols, 10 points practice and earth breathing, is that making sense to people? Are you following? Okay, no questions.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, great. Thanks, Russ. Okay, so next we have the sun. What is the sun's role in the solar system? And frankly, as rampant as sun sign astrology is, I don't think this question has really been addressed, to the degree that it should. And frankly, setting aside whatever understanding we might have, what understanding I have, just in the symbolism of the sun in itself, going back to the seed, we have the essence, and then this expanding circle as the life grows greater and greater into its potential. We have the divinity of the sphere, as Dan Rutger put it. So we're sort of clued into what is the sun. And is it the potential to have this experience? Is it the light that is shining through the projector, that allows us to experience individualization? The light that shines through the projector that allows us to experience the relative counterpart to ultimate bodhichitta. So there's something very grand, something very powerful about the position of the sun. And I think that although I could say, well, I'm a second house Pluto, or, my Pluto's in Scorpio or so on, in my heart of hearts, I identify as a Libra. I'm going to be having a sort of mundane conversation with somebody about astrology. So again, thinking about it as this white light that's shining through the rest of the lenses of the planetary bodies. And then thinking about its role in the solar system. We orbit around the sun, and regardless of whether the sun is orbiting around an even grander system, within our world we orbit around the sun, and the sun provides energy. It powers and empowers our experience on the earth. Wholesome food, vitamin D. It's something deeper than that, something more integral. So I don't know if anyone's done this before, because my familiarity with different astrology programs is pretty limited. I use Ephemeris, which is for Mac and iOS. And they give you the option to put the Earth within the chart. And the position of the Earth is, and this is taken directly from my chart, so you can already see that they're in direct opposition, the sun and the Earth. And if you're a 16-degree Capricorn sun, the position of the Earth is going to be 16 degrees Cancer, and so on. So we see this natural opposition. And when we think about this on a fundamental level, and we conceptualize the natal chart as geocentric, or as Dan Rutger puts it, human-centric in nature, we see that in the center of the chart, that's where we stand as an individual. And standing on top of the Earth is supporting us. So we can conceptualize the natal chart as, again, us standing in the center, and the planetary bodies around us providing a sort of gravity and reflecting the macrocosm of the microcosm of our life. Now, something curious to me is this space in the center represents us, or in a sense, it represents the Earth, geocentricity, the locations of the planets and the sun in relationship to the position of the Earth. Recalling the Earth descent exercise that I described earlier, where my awareness of my body was in union to my awareness of the earth. Perhaps there's something there. Perhaps like in the way where, we learn to integrate the polarity point of Pluto and the location of Pluto itself, or the nodal axis of the moon. Perhaps there's a sense of integration, that occurs when we look at the 180 degrees between the position of our sun and the earth in the chart. I don't necessarily have an answer to this. It's where my curiosity has been as of late. And I'd like to delve deeper into it, and if it interests you as well, you just explore the idea a little bit. Like, what is the role of the earth within the chart? What does it feel like to be embodied? Because I think at a certain point, at least these last 8 years for me, discovering astrology in the fall of 2010, I had a habit of really objectifying certain aspects of my life. Whether it was a relationship, or whether it was a past trauma, or whether it was, how is my day going to go, or looking at a solar return chart, yada, yada, yada. I was objectifying myself, and I was existing in the mind to a very high degree. And I'm not saying that, I don't do that now. Pretty heady by nature. It's learning how to integrate that, I guess, into the body. But it's trying to feel more intentionally. And I think that within the chart, if it really is everything that we are, and symbolically represents our life and the intention of the soul, anything that we find within the chart itself is going to be found within our own life. And we can challenge ourselves to feel that, rather than necessarily describing it, rather than saying, well, if my Pluto is in the second house, what does this mean for me? But at a visceral, guttural level, really feeling that and really seeing how it emerges from the body. As Reggie Ray teaches in the Dharma Ocean Lineage, the body is the Buddha. And it's our mind which, encourages all kinds of tension within our experience. But the body is this intelligent form that when we listen to it, when we feel into it, when we trust it, is able to guide us forward. Going back into the 10 points practice that I described before, when I'm experiencing my body as this ocean, with bits of tension, with bits of euphoria that's, maybe beaming out of my right big toe for some reason, and I'm not going to question it, but I can tune into it and I can listen to it. And what I discover is that it transforms. Stagnant energy, to put simply, is the mind's doing. It's the mind's fixity on a certain kind of reality. But when we feel into it and we try not to describe it and label ourselves, it has the capacity to change. It has the capacity to change and transform. And when I listen to my body, when I sit with it, when I sit with a certain tension, maybe the tension won't ameliorate, it won't heal in an instant. But I listen to it and I'm told stories. And the stories might not make sense on the surface. But, perhaps attention brings my mind into a place where I remember something that happened to me as a little boy, or it reminds me of a certain dynamic that I have with a friend or a parent. And I just listen to it and I give it space to breathe and to move. And within that, we can find the birth chart too. Someone did a chat. Kind of new at this, so I'm...
Yeah, 10 minutes left.
10 minutes, cool. So we'll carry forward a little bit. Great, so here's a picture of the chart using just these fundamental tools that I mentioned before. And I'm not disregarding the importance of Pluto or Neptune or Uranus or the nodal axis or the planetary nodes, but and I don't have an answer to this necessarily, but I've been challenging myself to, really intuit the chart from the perspective of these different functions of the mind. And this is my chart as an example. And I'm actually just going to carry forward to finish up, and then, I'd like to have some Q&A in the remaining time if that's possible. So there's integrating the charts, planets, signs, houses in a synthesis, and I think it's especially important to know why we interpret planets a certain way, or signs or houses in a synthesis. And in my own method, planets as the different functions of the mind, along with I think the definitions that Jeff Green put forward. I'm just putting a greater focus at the moment on the inner planets. The signs, which are going to be the energetic or creative colors, the qualities that we can filter the planets through. The houses, or the areas of the life, areas of the mind where these energies are going to emerge in the synthesis of it all. And then we have integrating the life, developing somatic practices where we can tune deeper into our body, allowing us to practice the question of how do we feel, and not just in a good or bad way, but actually tuning into the tension that's existing in our head, or our shoulders or something. And then again, astrology is a natural science, as Jeff Green has put so well. There's no difference between the chart and what's found in the human soul. Cool. I'd like to go back to, here, stop share. There we go.
Yes.
Cool. Questions and answers if people have anything they want to bring up or ask.
Yeah, do you think it is the mind that creates reality?
Like the personal mind?
Well, yeah. And the higher mind.
I think to a certain degree, I think we have the ability to relax into our life and not necessarily listen to the mind, and use the mind to obviously clue us into what's going on in our environment. What should I say in this particular moment? I encourage people to meditate, because I think one of the intentions of meditation is to learn to respectfully watch the mind and acknowledge the mind, but not necessarily follow it to high hell. I think the mind has the ability to influence us to a very high degree to live our life in a certain way, but I think that's going to be a way that's back and forth and mixed up. And frankly, when I follow my mind, it just confuses myself. I never feel like I'm actually getting anywhere. If that makes sense.
Yeah, what I mean is, like negative thinking, would that actually create negativity in the life? Like, like constant, like continuing, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it would, but I think that it simplifies what's actually going on when we say that negativity inspires negativity, because what it actually inspires is a much more specific dynamic than that. When we're constantly, say, questioning ourselves, or we're constantly putting ourselves in the role of a victim, it's not just like an on-off switch where life is negative, or life is positive if you have positive thinking, but there's a more nuanced degree to it all. And again, this is why I go back to meditation, because we could have negative thinking, or, we could have seemingly positive thinking. But frankly, I think it separates ourselves from the actual experience that's going on. And in a way, if we were to just disregard the mind as a whole, if the mind just wasn't there to begin with, and we had no sort of internal dialogue that was going on, talking about our life, frankly, I think we'd all just be a lot more naturally relaxed. Did that answer it a little more closely?
Yeah, in fact, I really do agree with you on that, but I was just curious. Yeah. Any other questions?
Did the information make sense to people? This is my first time really presenting in general, so it's nice to have feedback, and I know I'll get a little bit of that after the presentation is over, but just while we're here.
Yeah, it made sense to me, and yeah, like it's hard to put into words, but I can't put it into words. But yeah, on some level, on that other level, it makes sense. You know what I mean? It's not just through the words and the slides, and it's making sense on a deeper level.
Hey there. Yeah, I caught the second half of your meeting, and I really enjoyed it. I was laying down whenever you explained the meditation technique, so I was able to do that when you were explaining it, and it was really good. I also thought about whenever you were talking about the sun, the solar energy, and how there's a lot of something to that. I've even told people before, and I don't know if other astrologers agree with this or not, but I've said that if you don't get enough time outside in the sun, that your astrology may not be going so well. But yeah, I really keep learning and sharing. Enjoyed it.
Well, thanks, Russ. I'm glad you got to put those into practice right away.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's awesome. Thanks for the comment.
Yeah.
I was really enjoying following your thread and all the different disciplines that you were putting together to create a more holistic and embodied understanding of how these different energies play out in our lives. And that's something that I'm really drawn to also with astrology, is not being in your head about it, and what it means to yes, get all the information, do the Gemini part, gather all the facts and the data, but then how to like really integrate that into yourself and into like a higher knowing. And so the fact that you're bringing in all these other really important disciplines and things that people have already developed understandings around throughout time, that astrology, in my opinion, is just giving us a map toward. It's the tool, but that embodiment is the theme, and the idea that you could transcend all of the energies of all the planets into something that's completely cohesive, and that there are all these other maps out there too. And I think it makes sense to put them together. And also I think that when people are doing this work, they forget the importance of meditation. They forget the importance of these other practices that have been already understood throughout time, that help us to integrate things and changes and things that we experience. So yeah, taking it from the head and into the body. And while you're opening these things up, it can create like a way for spirit to communicate to you, to show you things in your life, that woundings, and it can create impetus for realizations and actualizations. But then our ability to handle the shock of that and integrate it, you need these other disciplines, you need these other practices. So the fact that you're bringing that to your talk, I extremely value. And I'm going to have to go back and rewatch it, because I got a phone call at one point that I had to take. And when I tuned back in, you were talking about the, what it the place of the earth in the zodiac. And of all things for me to miss, because it's something that I've thought about and don't have any formed opinions or thoughts on, but it feels really relevant and no one talks about it. So I'm really eager to go back and see what you had to say about that.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, thank you.
I think being somebody who loved books and loved music, I'm a musician. In fact, this Mercury retrograde has been, a renaissance on my lyrics. But being somebody who loves drawing together so many different things, and really respecting the fact that the things that a person is drawn into, the things that I'm drawn into throughout my life, there's meaning there. It's reflective of, like you said, following spirit. Like maybe there's a purpose to this if I learn how to integrate it together. But meditation and yoga and body work is helpful in order to contain. If I were to dedicate my life to some book I read, or I don't know.
Yeah.
There's a wider space for containment when we allow it to take place within our body rather than bringing something else in.
Yeah, and then it's not just a collection of facts.
Yeah, I suppose so.
Okay, great. Thank you for that wonderful question, Melanie, and Edward for your answers. So this brings us to the end of your meeting. It was fantastic. Thank you so much. Would you all please thank Edward Thomas, everyone?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And thank you, Linda.